Welcome everyone to accomplish your 2023 goals with support from skilled volunteers. We're so happy to have you all with us today. As you're introducing yourself in the chat, definitely shout out where you're located, where you're calling in from today. Taproot Foundation is a US-based nonprofit, but we provide programs to folks and organizations located in the US, Canada, the UK, EU, and India. So I'm curious if we have anyone from our international regions joining us today. It'd be great to find out. Oh, I just saw someone tune in from the greater Charlotte area. Jody, I think that was you. I am also based in Charlotte, so we'll have to connect after this. Speaking of connecting, please feel free to drop in those LinkedIn profiles if you are interested in networking with your fellow Taproot attendees on the line. All right, so we're excited to connect you each with each other and with Taproot during this event, and hopefully through our programs following the webinar. I'm excited to share more information about Taproot Foundation, our nonprofit, and how our business pro bono programs may be able to help all of your great organizations build capacity to do more really wonderful work in our communities. So with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get things rolling. My name is Kimberly Swartz. I'm the Director of Community Engagement here at Taproot. My job is really making sure that each of you has what you need in order to engage in our program successfully. So looking forward to connecting with each of you, whether you're based in Charlotte or beyond. So definitely check out that email and LinkedIn info listed here on the slide. I'm also joined by my Taproot colleague, Megan Gillette, who also sits on the Taproot Plus team with me and who will be covering the chat box during today's presentation. So if you see any chats coming in from Megan, that is our Taproot chat manager. So pay attention to those. All attendees will be muted throughout today's webinar, but please ask questions or make comments using that chat box. That's going to be the main way you can communicate with myself or Megan. Megan will be answering questions throughout, or if it's a bigger, meatier topic, she'll direct them to me so we can answer them during the Q&A time at the end of our presentation. So a little bit more about what we do here at Taproot Foundation. We're a nonprofit, and our focus is on driving social change and closing the resource gap for nonprofit organizations. So we're a nonprofit that supports our fellow nonprofits. And we do that by leading, mobilizing, and engaging professionals in pro bono service. Since the early 2000s, Taproot has partnered with over 8,000 social change organizations and tens of thousands of volunteers, totaling over $260 million in donated professional services. And we haven't even added our 2022 stats to that quite yet. So the next event that you join, those numbers might look a lot higher. In addition to Taproot's pro bono programming and CSR consultancy work, we also lead a global pro bono network and are committed to really advancing this movement and advancing the ethic of giving back in this really impactful way through further research, education, and events, such as this one that you joined today. So today we're going to be covering confronting this nonprofit sector issue of feeling like we can't or shouldn't invest in our infrastructure. We're going to talk through some tests for gauging whether or not your need is a good fit for partnerships with skilled volunteers. And the piece I'm most excited about, we're going to be joined by a very experienced Taproot nonprofit program participant, Ophelia Brinkley of Creative Imaginations, who has received over $150,000 worth of supportive services from Taproot Plus volunteers over the past several years. And then, as I mentioned, we'll save plenty of time for Q&A at the end of the event. A few quick logistical notes before we get things rolling. We are recording this presentation. We will share that recording link with everybody who signed up for this event. We also have a PDF of this deck available for those upon request. And we can send that to folks who, as well as the chat logs, to folks in need of them. So with those logistics notes said, I'm going to go ahead and dive right in to the heart of our presentation. So Taproot was founded as a nonprofit in 2001 with this knowledge that there's a massive resource gap present in the social sector, right? So organizations who may very well have solutions to our world's most pressing challenges simply don't have the financial means to carry out those missions to their fullest extent. So, to put this into context, the average US nonprofit reports spending under 9% of its total budget on overhead expenses, compared to over 20% traditionally spent by companies or for profit organizations to build a strong infrastructure. That gulf between what for profit organizations and not for profit organizations can spend, it ultimately impacts our nonprofits' bottom lines, the mission that we're delivering to community members, which means that social good organizations are missing out on key staff development or hiring opportunities. We could be making do without entire departments like marketing or technology. Or maybe we're cutting costs by continuing to delay key capacity building investments like CRM upgrades, a website redesign, developing an HR handbook, really just to name a few. And I'm curious, please shout out in the chat if any of this inability to really invest or prioritize infrastructure build out is resonating with any of you. So, to put it simply, most organizations tackling social problems don't have the access to resources, funding, or staff expertise that they need, that our communities need us to have access to. This lack of ability to invest in ourselves saps the ability, the capacity to create strong and resilient and sustainable organizations. And so that's really where Pro Bono can step in and be a huge resource for you. So Taproot Foundation bridges the nonprofit resource gap through connections with skilled volunteers who provide their technology, their marketing, their HR, their strategy, finance, or operations experience pro bono, free of cost, to nonprofit organizations. So during today's webinar, we're open to addressing questions on any of these areas of support, but it is really important to note that Taproot services do focus on the areas of marketing communications, HR, finance, business strategy, operations, and technology. And I call that out really specifically because it's completely natural that when you hear the term pro bono, your mind immediately goes to the legal space. So we're confronting that head on right at the start of the presentation. Pro bono really means so much more than legal. Pro bono is really a bucket terminology, an umbrella terminology for any donated professional services that benefit organizations or individuals working to improve society. So our programs focus on the non-legal side of things. And to dial in even further on the value of pro bono service and the value of using pro bono in other ways outside of the legal space, through a study that we completed originally in 2015, and then we used refreshed data in 2019, Taproot determined that the average value of an hour of pro bono service is $195. To put this into context for you, an average project through Taproot Plus, so an average donated Taproot Plus project, takes around 30 hours for the Taproot volunteer to complete, which means that your nonprofit is looking at donated services amounting to just under $6,000 per pro bono project that you request and complete through Taproot. So throughout the webinar today, when we continue to underline and highlight and put exclamation points by this idea that pro bono is a valuable tool, we really, really, truly mean it. By infusing use of pro bono, by infusing these partnerships with skilled professionals from the corporate space throughout your departments, you can save money on your bottom line while strengthening your capacity and building out this longer-term stability as an organization. So before we start digging into examples of what this could look like and we highlight our great nonprofit speaker, I'm going to go through a few quick tests, some quick best practices when it comes to thinking about Okay, pro bono sounds great in theory, but how could working with skilled volunteers actually play out at my organization? So these 4 tests will help you really put that into practice. So to dive right in, we've got scope, urgency, knowledge transfer, and staff and board readiness. So I want to start with possibly the toughest test for nonprofits. I know we've got a lot of folks on the line who are completely new to working with skilled volunteers. So this might be the funkiest test to get used to at the start. And it's called the scope test. So once you have a lot of wish list items, you have a lot of your 2023 projects listed out. It's probably a pretty long list. I know if I know anything about nonprofit professionals, it's that we're all incredibly overambitious. So once you have that long list of needs created, the first test you want to apply is for scope. So, how big is the need and how well defined is the end outcome that you're looking for? This isn't to say that you can't complete really huge projects or big projects by using skilled volunteer support. It just means that you need to be really specific and intentional about how you break up that really huge project or big initiative into well defined buckets that an individual volunteer has an opportunity to be successful in. So, a few examples. One, I see this a lot from nonprofits, especially when they're new to Taproot, where they come to us and say, I need social media management support. I need a volunteer to come in and help me manage my Facebook or Instagram channels. Taproot would go back to that nonprofit and say, well, that's actually a position, not a project, right? Because we need you to more clearly define what is the end outcome that you're looking for. Ongoing social media management is a role. It's not necessarily something that one volunteer can step in from the Taproot community to fulfill in a set number of weeks for you. And so we would go back and say, all right, let's break down, let's do some root cause analysis on your social media needs. Do you have graphics created to share out on social media? If not, let's find you a graphic designer who can help create a package of social media graphics for you that are usable on Instagram and Facebook. Do you have key messages prepared that a social media person could pull from and use on your channels? If not, all right, let's connect you with a copywriter to help you define what your key messages are, what your elevator pitch is as an organization. Do you have a social media analytics dashboard set up so you can track the return on investment you're getting from your social media efforts? If not, let's connect you with someone who's really great with data and who can help create you a simple and streamlined dashboard and some metrics, some success metrics to work towards. So hopefully you're catching my drift. It's never going to be a no, a volunteer can't complete this for you. It's going to be a let's break this up and make it more manageable for an individual to step in and be successful as a partner with you. All right, so that's test number 1. Test number 2 is going to be the urgency test. If the need is urgent, meaning very bad things will happen directly as a result of this project not 100% being completed by a certain deadline, then I would recommend not using pro bono to fill that need. So, worst possible scenario for us would be someone coming to Taproot a week before Giving Tuesday, so a week before Thanksgiving, and saying, I need someone to help me create my fundraising strategy for Giving Tuesday 2023. That would put us in a situation, and it would put Taproot volunteers in a situation where it's no win. There's no way that a volunteer can be successful for that. And if your organization is relying on those funds from your Giving Tuesday campaign to fund a really important initiative, that means that it's a no-win situation for your organization as well, because you're not guaranteed to get those resources in the timeline that you need it to. So make sure that you're planning for pro bono usage well in advance of a deadline. All right, my next test for you is knowledge transfer. Are you confident that you or other people in your organization can and will transfer the required information? Taproot Pro Bono, and I mean even Pro Bono that you use outside of Taproot as well. These 4 tests apply to volunteers you work with through our organization, or if you're seeking Pro Bono resources through other means as well. Um, think about this question before you post a Pro Bono need. Thinking about, do I have the materials that a volunteer will need to be successful in this engagement with me? If you're asking someone to come and create a new marketing deck for your organization, do you have a brand and style guideline that you could hand to that volunteer and say, all right, this is our color scheme. These are the rules for working with our brand and our images? Because if not, then they're not going to be able to create a new marketing deck for you because you don't have those guidelines ready to go for them. So think about what a volunteer would need. And if you don't have that available yet, maybe that's the pro bono project you should request first. It's also important to note here, just like logistics wise, the majority of Taproot volunteers will be virtual volunteers. So they're not going to be coming and working in the office with you. We do have an option to connect with people locally, but it severely limits the volunteer pool that you can connect with. So the majority of the relationships you'll form through Taproot are going to be virtual ones. So logistically, how are you going to transfer the required information? Are you going to give them access to your internal IT infrastructure, your SharePoint? Are you going to create a Google Drive folder for them? Whatever it is, think through the virtual logistics of how to make that happen. And then our final test is staff and board readiness. And this really boils down to, do you have buy-in to implement what the volunteer creates for you? So think to yourself, does your organization really want this? Or is it just you that wants this? This is important because several folks around your organization, or maybe from your board of directors, may need to be involved to make a project a success. The volunteer might need access to, they might need to conduct interviews with team members or interviews with board members. Are those folks who are going to need to be interviewed, are they on board with using their time in this way? So gain that internal readiness and gain that internal buy-in first, because really the worst possible scenario is a volunteer creating and developing a really beautiful deliverable for you, and then it just sits on a shelf because your organization wasn't ready to implement it. Okay, so those are our 4 core tests. I'm going to keep moving, but I'm seeing some great questions come in on these tests, and we'll make sure we cover this more later on in the presentation, and especially during Q&A time. So sit tight. We'll definitely get to those great questions. But I want to make sure we have time, a lot of time, to really dig into the area of what could this actually look like at a nonprofit organization. So we put together just some quick examples in the area of annual planning. We knew that this was a hot topic. Folks had submitted this in their registration form for the event, as this is really where their heads are at. And so I just want to cover some quick examples here before introducing our nonprofit expert speaker, who I know for a fact has completed several of the projects up on this slide, and we'll be interested to hear more about her experience there. But I saw folks chime in earlier that they're thinking about marketing planning for the year. They're also thinking about business development planning. So I just want to quickly highlight some of the project examples in the marketing bucket. Think about completing infrastructure building pieces that your team members or your board members, if you have a working board, can look to as kind of a foundational piece as they execute campaigns throughout the year. So things like a communications plan, or creating a communications checklist of, all right, when you have an event coming up, here are all the marketing channels you need to make use of. Here where all the tools for that live. Here's some stock messaging that you could lean on. I cannot recommend a communications plan more, especially for some of the smaller or some of the startup organizations on the line. This is something, the more you can templatize, the more structure you can build, the more efficiencies you're going to create for yourselves throughout the year. I'd also recommend things like conducting market research with a volunteer can be a hugely helpful project to complete right at the top of the year. That way you can lean on that research the whole year through. And then moving down to the strategy bucket really quickly, connecting with someone from the corporate world to ask for business development advice. How do I bring in more revenue to my organization? Whether that revenue comes through the form of sponsorship dollars, funders from the corporate or foundation space. Maybe you deliver services for a fee to community members. Maybe you're selling products through your website. Whatever your revenue streams look like, talk to someone from the corporate realm, and that's a great way that their skills can transfer to the nonprofit world and be hugely beneficial to you. Same with things like project management, conducting donor persona research or customer persona research, or conducting things like a SWOT analysis. Great. So I'm seeing that this slide has been helpful for folks. That's great. I'm going to go ahead and move on, but if we have time at the end, I'll come back to this slide and we can talk about it maybe a little bit more during that Q&A time. But I want to waste no more time. I want to make sure that we can get our panelists introduced because we have a really, really great guest speaker for you all today. So I'm so excited to be joined by Ophelia Brinkley, who's the president and executive director of Creative Imaginations, a nonprofit established in 2019. So I know I saw in the registration form for the event that we do have a lot of young organizations who joined us today. So Ophelia is a great case study in one of these startup organizations really investing in infrastructure and diving into relationships with skilled volunteers to help build those items, sometimes for the first time. So get your questions ready if you're a fellow startup org. Creative Imaginations does really fantastic work helping provide performance, art, music, and dance services and opportunities to young people, regardless of their circumstances, to enable them to reach their fullest potential. And they do that with the help of skilled volunteers, businesses, and partnering nonprofit organizations. I also want to note that Creative Imaginations has received over $155,000 in pro bono services just through Taproot. They're currently matched with 3 other skilled volunteers, so I expect that number to rise in the coming weeks. And for any volunteers on the line or people who are interested in volunteering, I do want to shout out that I saw 4 published projects from Creative Imaginations, and Ophelia, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but they're recruiting for more volunteer support. So if you are interested in connecting with Creative Imaginations to share your own skills, we can definitely provide those links. But for the time being, I'm going to switch us over to speaker view so that we can kick off our conversation. Welcome, Ophelia. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Great. So let's start with the basics. What made you decide to start working with skilled volunteers in the first place? What made you interested in using pro bono?
Well, actually, it came at a very great time. In the beginning, well, I could say in 2019, when we first got started out, I did have a business plan, but at the time, I wanted to make sure, just moving forward out of school and everything like that, I just wanted to make sure that we were set up for, success, and wanted to work with kids and things like that and implement our programs for the first time. And so I looked up on the Taproot Plus organization and learned about all the things that they offer for nonprofits. And so our first project consisted of working with a volunteer to help us basically review our strategic plan. And so with this reviewing our strategic plan came with finding ways to strengthen our organization's capacity. So at the time, starting out, you may have very little members of your board like me, which I have. And so, the Taproot organization basically was an opportunity for me to get individuals, that may lack thereof on board or just in
Yeah.
general to help, with these projects. And so, like I said, that was my first project, was to strengthen our organization's capacity. And so within that same project, and helping us with our strategic plan, consisted of a 3-year financial plan inside that strategic plan. So again, we wanted to make sure, because like when you're early on nonprofit, you may not have like all your financials and things like that. So they're going to have to be
Sure.
projected or forecasted. And so we had that done. And so with working with skilled volunteers, it's really about the communicating and the level of, comfortability that's between you and your pro bono volunteer. And so basically, we were able to, by communication, which they knew kind of all of what was going on with the organization. So this volunteer was kindly enough to also help pay for some fees that were associated
Wow.
with getting our 501c3 charity status. And I believe that
Great.
came with, the volunteer having some type of personal, thing with the
Yeah.
horse, things like that. So you never know what could
You
happen.
do. You never know.
And so we were lucky. And so just by that, we just kept going because we always had that support beginning with the Taproot organization to help us kind of stay motivated and keep continue doing our work. And so
Yeah.
we just kept going. And so went from one need to another. And so that's kind of how we were able to, keep using Taproot. And as far as like being a part of connecting with the organization who mission closely aligns with
Yeah.
ours, and connecting young people, with volunteers, as theirs is connecting nonprofits with volunteers. So we're kind of, I'm kind of passionate about what they do, and it definitely like was, win-win and connecting the dots, and I just call it lucky. And
Well,
so,
we're lucky to have you in our community because Ophelia has been one of our most active nonprofit partners and has offered her feedback and countless. You was featured as a case study in a study that we had done back in 2020. So you've been an invaluable resource for us as well. And actually, Megan, if I could maybe call on you to link to the project guide that Ophelia's organization is featured in as a case study. I think that might be interesting for folks on the line. So I heard so many good things in that response, and I want to make sure that we have a chance to dig into all of them. One was this was when you started using Taproot, you were fiscally sponsored by an organization. And
yeah,
then by working with Taproot volunteers, you were actually able to then establish or reaffirm, it sounds like, your strategic plan, your financial plan. And then that relationship turned into a donor relationship where that person actually donated and contributed the funds to help you apply for and get your 501c3 status. So
yeah,
I want to call out for everyone on the line that pro bono relationships, these partnerships that you'll enter into with skilled volunteers, are a lot deeper, I would say, in nature than traditional hands-on volunteering, where someone comes locally and maybe helps you paint a wall or package up a food kit. These are really in-depth partnerships where a person becomes a team member. And so we've seen countless examples of a pro bono project turning into, well, that person becomes a donor for the organization. That person introduces the nonprofit to their company's leadership team. So maybe the company can become a sponsor, a supporter of the org. We've seen people go on to become board members or even staff members. So I think, Ophelia, this example you called out is a really beautiful example. And I would love to hear more about what you did from your end to help foster a really good working environment for that volunteer and for your other volunteers, as you've had countless projects at this point.
mhm. Yeah. So basically, with that volunteer, he stayed on with the organization all the way till the project, was completed.
Mhm.
He were well aware of us receiving our 501c, charity status.
Yeah.
And with that, he stayed supportive until, he kind of got busy on some other things, but he stayed
Life
supportive.
happens.
Yeah, he stayed supportive, and I'm very thankful, for his support, and just words just could not express, the gratitude for, his help. I'm
Yeah.
thankful through the Taproot organization for being able to connect us. So I'm just super grateful for that experience. And yeah, it's been awesome. So
Great. Um, let's dig into some tips for using pro bono or working with skilled volunteers effectively. Because as we saw in the poll questions we asked right at the start of the event, most of the people on the line here today are completely new to this. So if you had to share maybe your one or two top tips based on your experience working with skilled volunteers, what is one or two top tips for using this type of support effectively that you would share with a fellow nonprofit leader?
okay, the top two tips would be plan ahead and use effective communication, because communicating is the key. I mean, even if you may like miss your Taproot call in the beginning, just reach out, email your volunteer, then email Taproot. It's just communication, and just like that's what I mean. And so, like as far as like planning ahead, the things that you really need help on, as far as like the marketing, the design, like she was saying, just kind of have like ready some things, that'll be helpful for the volunteers, kind of effectively do your project, within that time frame that you choose, because
Yes.
you can pick one week, what is it, 1 or 4 weeks, or three, I don't know. I don't really remember, but it's something like that. But just kind of be uh, courteous of the volunteer times, and as well as the time, that you select, because they can kind of only be thinking that this project is going to be a week, and then it takes longer. So that's what I mean. Like plan ahead, have all your information ready, and then that just makes a better, successful project.
Yeah, I think 100% everything you mentioned, especially just strong communications. Life does happen to both your volunteer partner or to you, right? So if a meeting
Yes.
needs to change, it needs to change. If an interview needs to be rescheduled, that's doable. We just ask you to be really communicative with your pro bono partner and communicative with Taproot, because we're the connecting resource here, and we can't keep our records up to date. We can't step in and be helpful to you unless we know what the situation is. So never be scared to reach out to us and say, oops, I messed up and missed an email. That is completely fine. We totally understand that.
Right.
I just saw a great question come in from Jana, Edna, in the chat around with multiple projects on your plate, who from your organization is interfacing with Taproot? Is it you, Ophelia? Do you have other volunteer coordinators at your organization? I think this is a really good question for you because you do have so many projects happening at one
Right.
time.
I do, and I have had several projects, ongoing at one time. And so the thing is, if you do have someone that you can put over seeing, communicating with the Taproot volunteers, and this may be somebody, even if you don't have, you may kind of want to bring on this person to be able
Yeah,
to communicate with them, and even be the one to kind of post the needs, and then just have that volunteer like accessible to be able to help you, like I said, stay on top of communicating with your volunteer, because like I know someone said like, hey, how long does it take? I've been waiting 3 months. Like you're in a pool of hundreds of other organizations, and volunteers are kind of looking at those needs to kind of say like, how they can give back, based on their skills. And so I believe patients have patience. And so, like I said, and then also the fact that, we can always critique our projects to where it may stand out, you can redo it, and things
yeah,
like that, and efforts to kind of get a better turnout as far as not having to wait that long for a volunteer. But yes.
That's really helpful advice. So what Ophelia was touching on there is that nothing is permanent on through Taproot Plus's system. So if you put a project request out into the world, and maybe a couple weeks in, it hasn't received any volunteer applications, that's a good sign that, all right, maybe something in the description isn't catching the eye of applicants as they're scrolling through the marketplace, because we have hundreds of opportunities to work with nonprofits that are published every day, every week, or updated every day, every week. So it's really important that, one, I'll go back to that scope test. Make sure that it's clear what a volunteer will actually be completing for you.
Mhm.
That's most of the time when we get feedback from volunteers about, well, why didn't you apply for this or that?
Right.
It's, I wasn't sure what my role would actually be with the organization.
Yeah, and I also seen someone list that they needed several projects maybe completed within 1 month. You can put that need out for several projects, but just kind of keep in mind if you get 4 volunteers, they're going to all need to be speaking with you, in a promptly and timely manner, because as soon as they reach out, it's like they're ready to work on your project, and you don't want to miss that, as
Yeah.
far as having so many needs out, and then it's like you're working with 2 volunteers already, and then you have another one that wants to work on your marketing, but it's just like, trying to, so just kind of keep that in mind. I'd say maybe one project at one time, but the important thing is always first. But if you do, like I said, always bring on the extra help if you can.
Ophelia, I literally got chilled, like actually got goosebumps when you said that, because that is, I know Pro Bono is free, and through Taproot, our accounts are free, our services are free to use. There's no price tag attached to anything that Ophelia and I are talking about here. But there is a cost from your end when it comes to the time it takes you to put together the scopes of work for the volunteers, and the time it takes you to interview candidates, bring them in, onboard them, and then project manage them along the way. And so there is a real cost on your end. And we're not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. Here, we want to be really transparent that Pro Bono is not always going to be the best fit for everyone and for every need, depending on what your bandwidth looks like. So I would recommend, look at that list with your priorities in mind, just like Ophelia said. And if there's something that's coming up too soon, mark it off. If there are 5 things, consider, all right, what are my 1 or 2 top, like these are needs to have versus these 3 could be nice to haves instead, because you want to take your own time and bandwidth into consideration as well. All right, so I'm seeing a few questions come in around what the actual process looks like on Taproot Plus. So I want to make sure that we have a chance to jump to that soon. But Ophelia, before I let you go for this portion of the presentation, one last question for you. And this isn't in the prep materials that I sent you, so I'm throwing you a
No,
curveball.
no, that's super fine.
Is there, looking ahead to 2023, because that's what our participants are doing on the line. They're looking ahead to the rest of the year, figuring out, okay, well, how could I work with volunteers? Are there any 1 or 2 projects that are on your mind? Like, what's next for you? What are you going to request on Taproot Plus next?
For me right now is because we've been kind of growing, and that people been kind of noticing our brand and things like that. So right now our focus is basically to upgrade our website and to be able to make changes, like just basically upgrade and make changes to our website is our next project, because our website is most of our target is
Yeah.
coming to, and as far as the traffic and things like that. And then when you are have a goal to increase your donors and things like that, having a great website presence is very important, as well as those donors want to see that their name, and you have the their recognition and things like that. We have been doing a lot of work, and like I said, when you don't have a marketing person or someone like that, and you kind of
Yeah.
can get a website, someone come on and be like, hey, can you help, put all these things on our website, that that's needed. But like I said, have all those things ready, those links, those, paragraphs, whether it's blog, whatever you
Yeah.
have, just kind of have it accessible. And so, yeah, so that is the next project that we'll be kind of working on for 2023.
That's beautiful. And I'm sure you just inspired some potential projects on our participants or our attendees list as well. So we're going to bring back Ophelia in just a few minutes. She'll be on call for our Q&A time. But for the next couple minutes, I'm going to just walk through the logistics of actually starting to use Taproot's programs. That way, everyone on the line can go start working on the process of getting signed up for an account and potentially jotting some ideas of what your first pro bono request could look like. Because we want to make sure you walk away with something tangible, right? We want to make sure you walk away with already having taken the first couple steps in participating with the Taproot Plus program. So I'm going to go ahead and click us back into the presentation deck. And we did have a request for closed captioning come in, so we went ahead and enabled that. So you should see that on the bottom of your screen if that's a need for you. All right, so let's talk about what's the simplest way to connect with skilled volunteers. It's through the Taproot Plus platform. So my colleague Megan is going to put a link up on the screen for you. If you don't yet have an account with Taproot, I highly recommend that you go ahead and create one. We've made things simple and streamlined and free of cost through our online nonprofit matching platform, Taproot Plus. It's designed to be really flexible and nimble so that any nonprofit, regardless of their size, their budget size, their staff size, how many years they've been in existence, you all have equal access to our skilled volunteer community. So again, it's completely free to use. It's our way of scaling up the pro bono movement and making sure that all those who are in need of infrastructure support, capacity building, and strengthening support have a way to access it. So currently, Taproot Plus is open to registered nonprofits, public institutions, so like public schools, libraries, firehouses, etc., and fiscally sponsored social good organizations in the United States, the United Kingdom, European Union, Canada, and India. And we have over 100,000 total users. And so in the coming months, the next region we're hoping to open up in is Australia. So if we have any Australian charitable organizations or volunteers on the line, hang in there because we should have access for you all figured out shortly. All right, so answering a few frequently asked questions really quickly. There's no limit to the number of staff members at your organization who can have an account on Taproot Plus. And Ophelia referenced this, right? So you could have a volunteer coordinator who's putting in multiple requests for volunteer support. At the same time, you are using your own Taproot account to request volunteers in a completely different area. So later today, when our team sends out the follow-up email from this event with the recording and some of the other resources we promised, please feel free to forward the information to a colleague who could also benefit from the virtual volunteer support. Again, there's no cap on number of accounts that your organization can have. And again, because this is a truly frequently asked question, it's our top one, there really is no fee here. So we're never going to ask you for payment information. Taproot is a nonprofit, and our mission is to help other nonprofits. So the only cost associated with our programs is going to be the time and energy that it takes to request and then manage skilled volunteers. So definitely keep that in mind. And I see we've got the banner up. So click in there to create or start the process for creating your account. You're going to need to have, if you're signing up as a nonprofit organization based in the US, you're going to need to have your EIN handy for that process. But other than that, it's only a few quick, simple questions. So the process should be a pretty quick one. But then here's the good stuff. Here's the fun stuff. This is the screen where you're actually going to be able to start submitting requests for skilled volunteer support. And you'll have two main options here. One is a project, which is a multi-week engagement with a volunteer who helps you create a deliverable. So that end outcome that we talked about when we were thinking about those four best practices, 4 tests for good pro bono. So that's a multi-week project where the volunteer is donating around 3 to 5 hours of their time each week. We also have something called a consultation session available. A consultation session is a one-time, 1-hour call with a subject matter expert. A few examples there. I've seen these be really great for like quick problem solving or just general brainstorming. So I've actually personally used sessions, these 1-hour calls for brainstorming volunteer retention tactics for the year ahead. As I've been crafting my strategy there, I've connected with a few HR professionals from the corporate world. And we're thinking about, all right, well, what are you doing on the staff side of things that I could pull over and replicate on the volunteer side of things? I also, in my past life, working on the marketing team, I connected with a few sessions on, hey, could you just audit the imagery that we're using on social media or on our website and tell me your thoughts on how it could be improved, how our photography could be improved, how our graphics could be improved. So there's lots of cool ways that you could use sessions. These are kind of great for people who are brand new to using pro bono, to dip your toes in the water a bit, because it's a 1-hour call. It's kind of low stakes, no strings attached. You can connect with someone for a call and see how helpful it was. And we give you the option to continue connecting with volunteers for that same call if you want to get a second opinion. So I highly recommend playing around with sessions if you're interested in just seeing what the pro bono process could look like. Once you have submitted a request for a project, so these are the longer term needs, going back to those, Taproot reviews every single one of those. And if there's any edits or adjustments needed, our help team will circle back to you through email. So make sure whatever email account you use to sign up on Taproot Plus is one that you check frequently. Because we will be in touch with you regularly through that email inbox. So once you create an account, once you post a request, we review it. We'll get back to you if anything is needed, but if everything looks good, it is going to be published to the live Taproot Plus marketplace, and it's going to have its own listing page like this one, which, Ophelia, this is one of your live projects. I don't know if you recognized it, but conducting a SWOT analysis, I pulled it from our site this morning.
Okay. Yeah, so that is one of the ones, like I said, like when they wonder, like, hey, because we haven't got no volunteer on that, so just like I said, just be patient.
Yes. So if we have any volunteers on the line today, we need a volunteer for the SWOT analysis project. But your page will look really similar to this one. Obviously, it'll have your own logo and picture on it, and it'll have your own project details on it. But share that link with your own network as well. Taproot will start sharing it out with the Taproot volunteer community through email, through our partnership with LinkedIn's volunteer marketplace. And so I see a question from Nancy that just came in. How do you know if there's interest in your project? You will know because of applications that come in. We'll alert you through email when you have a volunteer applicant for your project. So be responsive. Again, this is another reason, choose an email that you actually use regularly, because you don't want to miss those applications as they come in. You don't want to miss those alerts. So when you receive a volunteer application, you'll get to see their statement of interest, which is kind of like a 1 to 2 paragraph, like mini cover letter of sorts, where the volunteer gets to share, here's why I'm interested in working with you. And then you'll get to see their LinkedIn profile if they've chosen to link to it, an online portfolio, again, if they've chosen to link to it. So you'll get a good amount of information about the applicant, and then you get to decide, okay, this person looks like it could be a good fit. I want Taproot to help me set up an interview. And so we'll help set up a call between you and the volunteer applicant, which we call the interview, where during that time you can really dig in to see, all right, this person actually like has the skills we need. They're passionate about our mission. They're ready and prepared to work with us right now. I feel good about moving forward with them. The volunteer applicant can also use that interview to see if you're ready to work with them. The interviewing goes both ways, so I really recommend being prepared for that. A pro bono consultant is going to want to know that you're ready to do the knowledge transfer, one of those tests that we talked about earlier. They're going to want to know how this work will impact your community. Are you ready to implement the work that they deliver for you? They don't want to just create something and then it's never used, right? So they're going to want to hear you talk about how impactful the project will be for your team and for your community. So make sure you're prepared to answer those questions during the interview as well. And only if both the volunteer and the nonprofit say, yes, the interview went great, we want to work together, will Taproot mark the project as match. And then we'll send you kind of an automated email every week or so asking about how the project is going to see if you need any support from our team in moving it forward. So that's what the project process looks like at a really high level. Hopefully that answered some questions that have come in, but I want to make sure that we have some time for just general Q&A. So if you'd rather have your question answered privately, there's an email up on the screen, help@taprootplus.org. Please always feel comfortable emailing us there. We can have a one-on-one conversation. But for now, I'm just going to scroll through some questions that we've received to make sure we get to everything. Okay, Ophelia, I see a good question for you. Have you engaged with Taproot volunteers on the fundraising front? So any projects, and it looks like you answered this in chat, but I'd love to have you speak to it as well. So how have volunteers helped with fundraising capacity specifically?
Yes, I believe that it depends on like your project, which will go with like your event, your calls, or things like that. You can call action or, around your calls that you may have coming up. I would say just kind of put the need, be clear, as far as your expectations and things like that, what you expect from the volunteer. And I have used this for, we actually did utilize it for the grant research and writing.
Oh, great.
Uh-huh. And also for the sponsorship proposal.
Perfect.
Geared towards particular events. And so we will, like this year, we will be again utilizing, because one thing has changed for the organization is that we may even bring like, which I haven't even thought about Taproot, because I was like, oh, but it's a great kind of, way to kind of get, because we have a, what happened with us last year is we got a day, the mayor to proclaim Creative
Wow.
Imaginations Day. So June 1st, 2023 will be our first official,
Wow. We'll have to celebrate with
day.
you. We'll put it
Yeah,
on our
and so I
calendar.
think that, yeah, getting the support and volunteers and things like that. And I believe like even with this last question just popped up as far as the consultation, I will say yes,
Mhm.
please, whenever you're in doubt, yes, please get others involved. And so that 1 hour consultation, which I do believe volunteers are quicker to respond through a consultation than they do when you submit a request. So when you do the consultation, that advice you get from your pro bono expert, just kind of, use it to your, as you would to, better strengthen your organization, as I would do the same. So like I said, these are some things that like we have coming up and that we're definitely going to be utilizing Taproot for this year.
Good.
And so, yeah. And so, like I said, don't be afraid to kind of use that, but those, you may not kind of get a lot of, responses, just because that's like a, one of those needs is be like, have to
Yeah.
come from someone that really, has the time and things like that. But like I said, if it's small and, as far as them not happen to like be around or connected to your organization for a while, just, you may just kind of get someone to kind of help you with a short little project of your request and say you needing help with a specific grant, like, hey, could you help us, like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing some out there, but it could be many ideas.
Those,
But yeah,
yeah, no, those are all good. And I think it's really important to call out here that Taproot's volunteer community is primarily from the corporate space. So we do have some nonprofit professionals who also volunteer their nonprofit expertise to other nonprofits, right? But it's a smaller subset. So there are volunteers who offer grant writing, grant research, like fundraising strategy development. So those things are possible. It's very competitive. I'm going to be real with
yeah.
all of you. It
You
is
just aren't going to
competitive.
find it's just
Yeah.
maybe a handful opposed to a great
Hmm.
large of, number of
Exactly.
individuals to
And I'm sure
to
every
find.
nonprofit participant on the call here would love to have those resources. So it is competitive. So, what I encourage
Yeah.
everyone to do is think about ways that volunteers from the corporate space with that corporate experience could build or strengthen your fundraising capacity through things like, all right, I need to upgrade my CRM system to keep track of my donors more effectively. I need to build an email campaign series that encourages individual donations. I need to create a social media campaign encouraging individual donations. Like there's ways to drive fundraising that don't necessarily need that like nonprofit fundraising skill set. So that's where I'd recommend you do some brainstorming around. And then to Ophelia's point, um, volunteers, yeah, are usually we see quicker matches for those 1 hour consultation sessions because it's a 1 hour call. It's like a quick, easy way for a volunteer to make a difference. So that's kind of our quickest way to get support. Usually, our multi week projects take longer to get matched with a partner for. So, really, really good questions there. Um, Going through some of the other open questions. What is the process for receiving this support? What type of organizations are most likely to qualify? All organizations qualify for Taproot support as long as your organization is a registered charity in the US, the UK, the EU, Canada, India, and soon Australia. So you have to be a registered charity, or you have to be fiscally sponsored by a registered charity, or you have to be a public institution. So I think we had maybe one or two organizations sign up who are like a social good campaign of a city. I think specifically it was City of San Francisco, where some of the questions I saw came in. Yes, that applies. That would fall under our public institution eligibility. So yes, all are welcome. Um, Another question here. How can I attract volunteers to pick up my task? It hasn't worked for me yet. Ooh, volunteer recruitment. This is a really good question because I feel like, Ophelia, you just kind of spoke to some of the big tips there. One of them was small and specific. But I wonder, do you have any more tips for volunteer recruitment that you could share?
As far as through the Taproot or just in general?
I would say in general.
Okay. Well, with that, I would just kind of say, like, you can kind of start small, like you can offer like information sessions, to kind of get people to kind of, come for coffee and kind of,
Yeah, I love that.
you can kind of tell the organization,
Well, it looks like I'm not sure if this is the same for attendees, but I just lost Ophelia's audio. I wonder if other folks are having the same problem. If you could just confirm in the chat. All right. So Ophelia, we'll try and come back to you in a moment. We'll try audio again because it might just be a momentarily internet issue. So I'll jump in and I can speak to recruitment from the Taproot side. One being, make sure that your volunteer knows how they will be contributing to your organization. Make sure that the request is specific. and make sure that you have a plan for implementation, and state that in your Taproot request, saying what a volunteer creates for us is a priority at our organization because of XYZ, and therefore we are going to use it immediately in ABC campaign, right? Make it crystal clear that this is going to make an impact on our organization, and that's how it's going to make an impact on our broader community. So be really specific there. I wonder, Ophelia, do you want to try jumping in again to see if we've got your mic back? Oh no, unfortunately, it looks like it's still not working. All right. Well, if we're not, I know we're already a couple minutes over on time, so that's totally fine. We're going to go ahead and we'll share Ophelia's LinkedIn information with everyone who registered. So please feel free, connect with her on there, get some networking going. We would love to make it so that more connections happen outside of this event too. And so even if we're not able to get Ophelia back during this time, please connect with her on LinkedIn, and we'll also share the website for Creative Imaginations, her nonprofit. So we can all celebrate Creative Imaginations Day on June 1st. I'm going to stick around for another couple minutes just to continue working through some of these general Taproot questions. So what happens if you need a specific kind of help and you're not sure how it fits into the Taproot ecosystem? Is there a Taproot guide who can triage? Oh, this is a beautiful question. And I'm really happy to share that we've recently added we've made an investment in our team, and we now have a nonprofit success coach who is a member of the Taproot Plus team. So if you're at a stage where you're not sure about project scoping, you're not sure how to lay out or design your project request with recruitment best practices in need, or you're not sure if it fits into the Taproot ecosystem, we have a recurring Thursday call with our Taproot success coach, our Taproot nonprofit success coach, that all nonprofits are welcome to attend. So in the follow-up email to this event, I will include the sign-up link to that Thursday call. And it is a standing time. So if you can't make it this Thursday, it is going to be on the books for next Thursday and the Thursday after that. So it is always your nonprofit space to connect with our team members, just to talk face-to-face. It's just in a Zoom room. So would definitely recommend that. We also have one-on-one nonprofit coaching services available. If you attend one of those scoping office hours and you're like, oh, okay, well, I actually need more individualized support, we can offer a one-on-one call with our coach as well. So we'll include those links in the follow-up email, and I would really love for everyone to sign up for those if it would be helpful. And then I see a question around would the consultation session be a good way to help a nonprofit prioritize which projects to pursue? Yes, absolutely. Use that time with a volunteer to kind of start stacking your priorities against one another. And that can also help you prioritize your own plate as well. All right, here's what I need to knock out in Q1. Here's what I'm going to delegate to volunteers through Taproot or through other means as well. So I love that idea. I think it's a perfect use for a Taproot Plus session. And I guess another note on sessions, and I kind of briefly mentioned this before, but I think it makes sense to underline. A session, you can connect with one volunteer, and then Taproot will ask you, do you want to continue connecting with other volunteers on this same topic? So if you have one conversation and that conversation went so well, all your questions were answered, you can say, oh, no, I don't need to connect with anyone else. That's perfect. But if the session went great and you would love to get a second perspective or a third perspective, you can continue to just connect with one Taproot volunteer after another for the same call topic. So that session, even though it's just a one-time 1-hour call with a single volunteer, you can connect with multiple volunteers again and again and again, which is great. All right, I see one final question on my end. which is around Taproot vetting of volunteers. And I think Megan posted some good information about that in the chat as well. But just to put it really simply, Taproot volunteers kind of agree to a community agreement of sorts when they apply to a Taproot project, which is I commit to having the experience necessary to fulfill this role without the nonprofit training me on this role. So we really dial it in to volunteers that there's no one on the nonprofit's team that's going to be available to train you and teach you how to do this topic. You need to be the expert on it, right? Because the nonprofit doesn't have the time or capacity or energy to teach you. So we're expecting the volunteers to have the appropriate skill set. And usually that comes with at least 3 years of professional experience in a specific area. And so that's what we ask them to agree to in that community agreement. However, that interview stage of the project is really where the true vetting will take place, because you'll see their application, you'll see their resume, you'll see their portfolio or LinkedIn profile. You'll have access to a lot of information about the volunteer. But that interview is where you can really dig in and determine this person actually does not have the qualifications I need, so I am going to politely decline them, and I'm going to continue looking for other volunteer applicants as well. So Taproot does some minimal vetting, but we really encourage you to be really diligent with your own vetting process as well. Okay, so I think we worked through all of the open questions. If we somehow missed one in the chat, we are going to follow up with everybody following this presentation, either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. So you'll have our email. You can always ask your questions then. And so let's definitely continue this discussion even after this afternoon. We're going to go ahead and close things out for now, but I do want to take a moment, and I hope you'll all join me in thanking Ophelia Brinkley profusely for taking the time to join us today. I'm sorry we lost audio at the end, but before that, you gave us tons of great information and advice. So we really appreciate your time on that. So we'll provide Ophelia's information and would really encourage everyone to keep in touch with her. And really appreciate everyone who joined the call today. So we'll talk to you all soon. We'll be in touch through email. Bye, everyone. Have a good one.